Everyone saw her raise that phone, but no one asked why she was calling. They just watched, while I stood there, holding a single box, wondering how moving into my own home had somehow become a crime. The mountain morning was supposed to feel perfect. The kind of day you lock into memory forever: blue sky, sharp pine-scented air, the quiet crunch of gravel under boots. My moving truck looked oversized against the narrow road, but my heart was racing with something more than stress. It was joy. At 38 years old, I was finally moving into a place of my own. Not a rented apartment, not someone else's rules. My cabin, my dream. I had just pulled out the first box, the one labeled kitchen dishes, when the sound of a door slammed through the silence like a gunshot. It echoed across the cabins, rattling inside my chest. I turned and saw her. A woman marching toward me with that practiced confidence of someone who's always in charge. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair. Polo shirt tucked into khaki pants so stiff they didn't dare wrinkle. And in her hands, a clipboard and a phone already recording. She didn't greet me, she didn't ask who I was. She started snapping pictures of my boxes like I was unloading stolen goods. Her voice cut sharp across the driveway. "Excuse me," 20 feet away, and already speaking like she had authority over me. I forced a smile, tried to play neighborly. "Hi there, I'm Daniel Brooks, just bought this place, moving in today." I gestured toward the cabin behind me, my cabin, hoping she'd relax. Instead, her face tightened. "Monica Reeves," she announced, as if her name alone carried power. "President of this neighborhood, HOA, and you are trespassing." I blinked, half convinced I'd misheard her. Trespassing? I was standing in my own driveway, holding a box cutter with my name printed across a deed I'd signed just weeks before. Still, I tried again, calm, patient. I held out the ownership certificate. "This is official, verified by the bank and county. You can see the seals right here." But she shoved it away without even looking. "Anyone can fake paperwork these days," she said, snapping another picture of my boxes. "These containers could be hazardous. HOA policy requires inspection. You'll be on our watch list by sunset. Smile for the group." Her words froze me. A watch list. I wasn't a criminal. I was a man trying to move his grandmother's dishes into his new home. That's when she lifted her phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. Her voice dropped into a tone of dramatized urgency. 911, what's your emergency?" came the dispatcher's reply. And Monica said it without flinching. "I need to report an illegal trespasser. Male, unloading boxes, documentation suspicious." My mouth went dry. She was describing me like a burglar caught red-handed. My heart hammered in my chest, and for the first time, I wondered if the police would actually believe her. The silence after that call was worse than any shouting match could have been. Neighbors peeked out from their windows but didn't step outside. The street felt hollow. No dogs barking, no mowers running. Just Monica, standing there smug, checking her watch every 30 seconds, as if she'd orchestrated this moment long ago. I clutched my certificate tighter. My breath fogged in the cool air. And all I could think was, how did a simple Saturday morning turn into what felt like a criminal investigation? She leaned in then, voice low, deliberate. "You've got 10 minutes to get off this gravel, or I'll call again." And I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about power. The sound of tires crunching against gravel carried through the mountain air like thunder rolling down from the peaks. I turned toward the winding road, heart hammering, and saw the black and white cruiser climbing the hill. Its lights flickered once against the tall pine trees, red and blue flashing across my moving truck. Monica straightened her polo, smoothed her hair, and lifted her clipboard like a badge. She actually waved at the car. "Over here, officers," she called out, as if she were summoning a rescue team to save her from some imminent danger. But the danger was me, or at least, that's the story she wanted them to believe. I felt my throat tighten. I'd never been arrested, never even had so much as a parking ticket that went unpaid. But the way Monica stood there, confident, triumphant, I started to wonder. What if the cops believed her version of the story? What if a signature had been missed in my paperwork? What if they slapped handcuffs on me before I could explain? The cruiser rolled to a stop. The driver's door swung open. And then, something happened that Monica hadn't prepared for. Because the officer who stepped out didn't look suspicious. He didn't look angry. He looked like he'd just spotted an old friend at a backyard barbecue. His face broke into a grin. "Daniel Brooks," he called across the driveway, walking toward me with his hand extended. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. My stomach dropped, then flipped, and I had to grip the side of the truck to keep myself upright. It was Carter, Officer Carter, the same man I'd worked alongside for 3 years at the city's police charity fundraiser. The man I'd called Buddy a dozen times over burgers and raffle tickets. Monica froze mid-stride, her clipboard hovering uselessly in front of her chest. Her smile collapsed into something raw, almost pale. Carter clapped my shoulder, laughed, and said loud enough for the whole street to hear, "Man, I haven't seen you since spring. How have you been? Moving in today?" I nodded, still stunned. "Trying to," I managed, voice shaking with a mix of nerves and relief. His partner climbed out of the passenger side and gave me a friendly nod. "Good to see you again, Daniel. Hope the move's going smoothly." It felt like someone had just flipped the scene upside down. A moment ago, I was the criminal. Now I was the guy the cops were happy to see. Neighbors began to peek out again, more boldly this time, curious whispers carrying across porches. And Monica's face turned crimson. She jabbed her clipboard toward me. "Officers, this man is trespassing. He has no permits. His documentation could be fraudulent." Carter's expression shifted. He reached for the certificate I was still clutching and gave it a quick, professional look. Seals, notary signatures, county stamps. He handed it back with a nod. "Looks legitimate. Congratulations on the new place, Daniel. Beautiful cabin." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. She tried another angle. "Well, what about the noise violations, the disruption to the community's peace?" Carter glanced around, a quiet Saturday morning, a single moving truck, one box of dishes. He pressed his lips together, trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, I see someone moving during normal hours, nothing illegal here," his partner added. "Looks like a standard move to me." The authority in their voices landed like a hammer blow. Monica's power was slipping. The neighbors knew it. She knew it. I knew it. But she didn't stop. "This isn't fair," she snapped, her voice higher now, cracking with the weight of frustration. "I am the president of this HOA, and I will not be disrespected like this." Carter's tone cooled, gentle but firm. "Mrs. Reeves, 911 is for emergencies, fires, accidents, medical crises, not for someone unloading boxes into their home." He gave her one last look, the kind that says this conversation is over, then turned back to me with a warm smile. "Good luck with the move, Daniel. Holler if you need help with the heavy lifting." The cruiser pulled away, its rumble echoing off the cabins. And in its wake, the entire neighborhood felt different. People emerged from their houses, chatting, pointing, some even chuckling. The tension that had frozen the street thawed into something lighter, almost festive. I could feel their eyes on me, sympathy, curiosity, even quiet admiration. But Monica, she stood rigid, her jaw tight, her hands shaking around that clipboard. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone. She just whispered something sharp to the woman beside her, then stormed back toward her house. For a few blessed moments, I thought it might be over, that the storm had passed. But I was wrong. Because Monica wasn't finished. She was only just beginning. And what she had planned next would drag the entire community into a battle far bigger than one man moving into a cabin. Everyone heard her voice echoing through the clubhouse walls, but no one dared interrupt her. Not yet. Sunday evening, less than 24 hours after Monica's humiliation, I walked up the creaking steps of the community clubhouse. The air outside was crisp, mountain wind cutting sharp against my face, but inside it was hotter, charged, the kind of heat that doesn't come from a furnace but from tension brewing behind closed doors. I could hear her before I even opened the door. Monica Reeves, the HOA president, still clutching her authority like it was the last thing keeping her upright. Her words rattled the thin wooden walls like courtroom accusations. "Daniel Brooks has shown complete disregard for our established community protocols," she declared, her voice swelling with performative outrage. "His moving activities created chaos and required emergency intervention from law enforcement." Emergency intervention. That was how she described Carter greeting me like an old friend. The way she twisted the story was almost impressive if it hadn't been about me. I pushed the door open. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me at once. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum, some faces curious, some sympathetic, others cautious like they didn't want to be seen taking sides. And there was Monica, standing at the front like a politician delivering a campaign speech. Laser pointer in one hand, poster board full of printed photos in the other. My moving truck parked in my driveway, me carrying a box, her evidence carefully displayed like damning proof. Her smile faltered when she saw me. She hadn't expected me to show up. "Good evening, everyone," I said, trying to sound confident, even though my stomach twisted with unease. "I'm Daniel Brooks, the new guy on the street. I just wanted to introduce myself properly, since yesterday got a little out of hand." A few chuckles broke the tension, small but enough to crack Monica's veneer. Her jaw tightened. She flicked the laser pointer across the board. "As you can see, Mr. Brooks conducted unauthorized commercial activity on residential property." I squinted. The photo was literally just my moving truck in my own driveway. My box labeled kitchen, nothing commercial about it. "That's a standard move," someone called from the back. "My daughter hired the same rental company last year." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, heads nodding. Neighbors exchanging glances that said, "Wait, is this really what she's calling us here for?" Monica's hand trembled. She motioned to Diane, her ever-loyal assistant, who hurried forward with a folder of papers. Diane's voice was quieter, less certain. "These are the community regulations that apply here. All moving activities require 48-hour advance written notice to the HOA board and must be supervised by a community representative." Silence, thick, heavy. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, whispering things like, "I've never heard that rule before, and is that even real?" That was my opening. "Excuse me," I said, raising my hand like a student in class. "Could you show us the official meeting minutes where those rules were approved, and the signatures from residents who voted on them?" Monica's face drained of color. She shuffled her papers, flipping frantically, but there was nothing. No signatures, no minutes, no votes. I pressed further, calm but sharp, like I'd been trained to do in my accounting audits. "Because as far as I understand, major HOA rules can't just appear overnight. They need community approval, and I'd really like to see when this rule was established." The room buzzed, people leaned forward, whispers grew louder. Monica slammed her hand against the podium. "I am the president of this association," she snapped, voice breaking under the strain. "And I make the decisions that protect this community." That was it, the mask slipped. "Actually," a man in the front row said calmly, "that's not how HOAs work." He introduced himself as a retired lawyer, his voice steady with authority. "Presidents can't unilaterally create binding regulations. Everything must be voted on by the board and the community." Gasps, murmurs, heads turning. Monica's cheeks flushed scarlet as her supposed power cracked wide open. I looked around, letting the silence stretch, then asked, "So why exactly did moving into my legally purchased home with proper paperwork require a 911 call?" That landed hard. Neighbors nodded. A woman whispered, "That's ridiculous." Another said, "She did the same thing to me when I tried to put up a new mailbox." The room was shifting. The power that had once been Monica's was sliding away from her, spilling into the hands of the people she'd ruled through fear. Her voice shook as she tried one last defense. "This discussion is out of order. I am calling this meeting to a close." But no one moved. The retired lawyer stood again firm. "No, Mrs. Reeves, community members have the right to ask questions. That's in the bylaws. You don't get to silence us." For the first time, Monica looked small. Her laser pointer trembled in her hand. Diane stepped back, and the crowd, once silent, obedient, was restless, murmuring, pressing, questioning. I rose from my chair, slowly, deliberately. "Tomorrow, I'll finish moving into my home, and I hope we can build a community where neighbors help each other instead of calling the police over kitchen dishes." Applause broke out, not loud, not unanimous, but real, genuine. enough to make Monica flinch as if every clap was a nail driving into her authority. And in that moment I saw it clearly. She wasn't finished. She was wounded, cornered, dangerous. Because when people built their power on fear, and that fear cracked, they didn't let go quietly. They came back harder. And Monica was already planning her next move. The next morning, I found my trash cans tagged with bright orange stickers that screamed improper placement violation. I stood there in the crisp mountain air, staring at the absurdity. Tuesday night, trash pickup scheduled for Wednesday morning. I had put them out exactly like every other house on the street, but only mine wore those fluorescent warnings, plastered across the lids like scarlet letters. A neighbor jogging past slowed when he saw them. He shook his head, muttered, "Never seen that before," and kept going. I peeled one sticker off. The glue left residue on the plastic, sticky under my fingers. And I realized this wasn't about trash. This was about humiliation. Monica had lost her grip in the clubhouse, and now she was clawing for control any way she could. By the afternoon, she doubled down. Red flyers appeared taped to my front door, tucked under my windshield, even shoved into my mailbox. Bold black letters shouted, "Unauthorized moving activity. Violation in progress." It was almost comical, until she started handing them directly to my neighbors. That evening, as I hauled my couch toward the porch, Mr. Patterson, the elderly gentleman across the street, shuffled over, his hands gripping the armrest to help me maneuver it. His back bent, his voice rasped, but his determination was unshakable. Monica appeared like a storm, papers flapping in her hands, hair still perfect, eyes blazing. She slapped one of those red flyers onto my door, then thrust another into Mr. Patterson's frail grip. "All participants are in violation of community standards," she barked. Mr. Patterson looked at the paper, then back at her, his wrinkled face folding into something halfway between disbelief and pity. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I've been helping neighbors move furniture since before you were born. If that's a crime, then this whole country's guilty." His words cut sharper than anything I could have said. Neighbors gathered, some carrying coffee mugs, others standing with crossed arms, watching, judging, and something shifted. For the first time, Monica wasn't commanding the crowd, she was alienating them. Mrs. Henderson, 2 doors down, raised her voice. "I've lived here 18 years. This is the first time I've been threatened with a fine for helping someone move a couch." Another voice joined in. Julia Evans, a teacher who lived down the street, stepped onto her porch. Her tone carried authority born from classrooms full of restless teenagers. "How exactly," she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "is someone dangerous for unpacking bubble-wrapped dishes? Should we call 911 every time a delivery truck drops off a sofa?" Laughter rippled across the group, genuine, defiant. Monica's eyes twitched as she clutched her clipboard tighter, her papers fluttering like wings trying to escape. And then one sheet broke free. It danced in the wind, tumbled under my moving truck, and disappeared. The image struck me hard, her evidence literally blowing away, just like her authority. I leaned against the truck, catching my breath. Inside, I was trembling with a mix of rage and amusement, but outside, I forced calm. "If bubble-wrapped dishes make me this street's most dangerous criminal," I said, voice even, "then I guess I'm the most adorable outlaw in town." Chuckles spread, heads nodded, and Monica, for the first time, looked cornered. But she wasn't done. 2 days later, a white SUV with no plates appeared at the edge of my driveway. Inside sat a man with a clipboard stamped civic compliance. He didn't step out. He didn't speak. Just sat watching. Every time I walked outside, his eyes flicked down, pretending to scribble notes. His presence wasn't official, I could tell. No badge, no government insignia, but the intimidation was obvious. Monica had escalated from flyers to surveillance. At night, I caught her on her porch, whispering into her phone, gesturing toward my house, checking a notepad like she was following a script. Each call lasted 10 minutes. Each one left her more frantic. By Saturday, she'd launched her boldest strike yet. An emergency HOA meeting. Flyers slid under doors announced it. Mandatory attendance. Community safety in jeopardy. When I arrived, the clubhouse was packed. The air buzzed with the low hum of uneasy conversations. Monica stood at the podium, laser pointer ready, photos taped to poster boards behind her. My truck, my boxes, even a blurry zoom of my trash cans. She raised her chin, voice theatrical. Daniel Brooks has brought chaos into our neighborhood. His activities required police intervention. His disregard for our rules threatens our community values. But something was different this time. The crowd wasn't leaning forward in support. They were leaning back, skeptical, eyes darting toward me, toward each other. People were no longer afraid of Monica. They were beginning to question her. I stood slowly, my voice steady. All of this, I said, gesturing at her wall of photos, is me moving into my home, legally, quietly, with proper documents, and all of you know it. You watched it. Murmurs, nods, a wave of agreement building. And what I don't understand, I continued, is why helping a neighbor move furniture now counts as an emergency. Why 911 was called over kitchen boxes. A silence fell, heavier than any accusation, because the truth was undeniable and everyone felt it. Monica's hands shook. Her papers rattled against the podium. She shouted, "This discussion is out of order. I am the president." But the retired lawyer in the front row rose again, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. "No, Mrs. Reeves, community members have the right to question authority, and tonight we will." The room erupted, not in chaos, not in fear, but in defiance. Neighbors who had stayed quiet for years began raising their voices, asking about rules Monica had imposed, fines she had collected, stories of harassment they'd endured. I realized then this wasn't just about me. My moving day had been the spark, but the fire was much older. Monica had ruled through intimidation for years, but the silence that once protected her was cracking. And for the first time, she wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting an entire community ready to push back. They handed me papers on my own porch, and for the first time, I wondered if Monica's war might actually ruin me. Tuesday afternoon. The mountain air was calm, the kind of weather that made me grateful I'd left city chaos behind. But when Officer Carter's cruiser rolled up, the look on his face wasn't friendly. No handshake, no easy smile, just that professional mask cops wear when the situation is serious. "Daniel," he said, voice measured, "we need to discuss something important." My heart sank. He wasn't here as a friend, he was here as an officer. He handed me a packet, a temporary restraining order, filed by Monica Reeves, claimed I'd threatened her leadership with malicious interference. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. The language was sharp, legal, designed to sting, endangerment of community stability, harassment of the HOA president. None of it true, but it didn't matter. On paper, it looked real. Carter sighed, almost embarrassed. "Off the record," he said quietly, "this is the most ridiculous filing I've seen in years. It'll be dismissed before she parks her car, but we have to serve it." I nodded, numb, my stomach twisting into knots. She wasn't just tapping flyers to my door anymore. She was weaponizing the legal system, and suddenly the battle felt bigger than red papers and angry speeches. Carter gave me another document, this one his own. An incident report he'd filed after Saturday's 911 fiasco. Reading his words, misuse of emergency services, no criminal activity observed, resident acting within legal rights, gave me a rush of relief. Proof. On record. Monica's power play had backfired. "She's been issued an official warning," Carter explained. "Any further misuse of 911 could trigger automatic citations, fines, even criminal charges." I swallowed hard. The irony hit me. She had tried to use the police against me, and now it was her name sitting in their system under misuse of emergency services. But Monica wasn't retreating. She was doubling down. That evening I heard voices outside. I glanced through my kitchen window and froze. Julia Evans, the teacher who'd spoken up at the meeting, stood with a folder in her hands, surrounded by a small group of neighbors. They weren't whispering rumors. They were organizing. Carter followed me outside as Julia stepped forward, opening the folder. "We thought you should know," she said, her tone steady, calm. Inside the folder, a petition. Pages upon pages of signatures. We've formed an ethics committee, and we're moving to recall Monica Reeves as HOA president. I flipped through the sheets. Names, addresses, more than half the neighborhood already signed. People I barely knew had joined this cause. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with hope. Carter examined the petition, nodding. This looks legitimate. Proper legal channels, much more appropriate than calling emergency services. His voice carried emphasis, pointed enough for Monica, who was watching from her porch, to hear. Her face blanched. For once, she wasn't in control. But still, she tried. She stormed down her steps, waving the warning citation Carter had served her hours earlier. "This is invalid," she shouted, thrusting the paper in his face. "I am the president of this association. I have authority." Carter didn't flinch. "Authority doesn't override law, ma'am," he said evenly. "Misusing 911 has consequences, and future misuse will result in fines. You've been warned." Her hands shook as she crumpled the warning, glaring at me with a look that wasn't just anger anymore. It was disbelief. Like she couldn't fathom how her empire was crumbling. Neighbors watched, some smirking, some whispering, but no one came to her defense, not this time. For the first time in years, the street wasn't hers. Later that week, the recall vote was announced. Thursday evening, same clubhouse, same folding chairs, but this time the mood was different, serious, determined. I sat in the back row, not wanting to appear like I was pulling the strings. Julia stood at the front, appointed interim chair, calm and organized. Ballots were counted in front of everyone, transparent, fair. When she announced the results, the room erupted. 27 votes for removal, 4 against. The numbers weren't close. Monica sat rigid in the front row, her face unreadable, her knuckles white around her clipboard. When the results sank in, she stood slowly, shoulders sagging under the weight of a loss she never imagined possible. "I apologize," she said finally, her voice trembling, "for misuse of emergency services, for wasting resources." She read from a prepared statement, but the words sounded like they burned her tongue. No applause, no sympathy, just silence, and in that silence her power collapsed. But here's the thing about people like Monica. They don't just vanish. They cling to whatever scraps remain. And as I watched her gather her papers, her eyes locked on mine with a promise. This wasn't over. Not for her. And not for me. She lost the title, but she didn't lose her obsession. The Thursday night recall vote had ended her presidency. 27-4. The numbers were decisive. The air inside the clubhouse felt lighter, freer, like a lid had been lifted off years of pressure. Neighbors shook hands, whispered about new beginnings, and for the first time since I moved in, I felt like I belonged. But Monica Reeves didn't look defeated. She looked hollow. She gathered her papers in silence, her clipboard no longer a weapon but a shield. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I apologize," she said, eyes fixed on the floor, "for misuse of emergency services." The words were forced, dragged from her throat like gravel. No one clapped, no one smiled. And when she walked out alone, there was no dignity in her exit, just the heavy footsteps of a ruler dethroned. I wanted to believe it was over. That night, sitting on my porch with coffee in hand, I breathed in the mountain air and thought maybe, just maybe, peace had returned. But then I saw her house, lights still on, curtains shifting, her silhouette packing, a phone pressed to her ear, and I realized people like Monica don't surrender, they scheme. The next morning, evidence proved me right. A white SUV appeared again at the edge of my driveway. Same clipboard, same blank stare. I stepped outside, crossed my arms, and waited. The driver avoided my gaze. He scribbled notes he didn't want me to see. Then he drove off. By afternoon, my mailbox held a new letter. Bold red ink across the top. Community Safety Review, Temporary Order. The wording was official sounding, but I knew it was. Printed on cheap paper, no county seal, no board signature. Just Monica's familiar phrasing repackaged. She'd been removed, but she was still trying to rule. That evening, Julia Evans knocked on my door. She carried a folder, the same calm determination in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said. We sat at my kitchen table while she laid everything out. The recall vote stripped her title, but Monica's still filing complaints. County offices received 2 emails today. Claims you're running unlicensed business activities from your home. I felt my stomach drop. Business activities, I'm unpacking plates. Julia sighed. She's desperate, but the thing about desperation is it's unpredictable. You need to be ready. Her warning proved true 2 nights later. I'd just finished setting up my home office when the sharp beam of headlights cut across my living room. Midnight, too late for visitors. I peered out the window and froze. Monica's car sat in my driveway. She didn't get out. She just sat there, engine idling, staring at my house through the windshield. I stepped onto the porch, my phone in hand. "Monica," I called out. My voice echoed across the cabins. "What are you doing here?" No response, just silence. Then slowly her window rolled down. "There are procedures for everything in this community," she said, her voice low, trembling, almost unhinged. "And you think you're above them." Before I could answer, she rolled the window back up and drove away. The tail lights disappeared into the trees, leaving only the sound of her tires grinding over gravel. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering just how far she was willing to go. The next day, Carter returned. This time, he wasn't just checking in, he carried another folder. "She filed 3 new complaints," he said, setting the papers on my counter. "County inspector, civic code enforcement, even the fire marshal, all baseless, but they require responses." I rubbed my temples. She's not going to stop, is she? Carter's eyes softened. "No, not until consequences force her to. The recall was just step 1. She still thinks she can outlast you." Outside, the neighborhood felt different. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now waved, brought over baked goods, offered help carrying furniture. People were tired of Monica's reign, tired of her fear tactics. Her downfall had opened something, a chance for the community to breathe again. But even as I shared coffee with Julia, even as Mr. Patterson told me stories of the old days when neighbors looked out for each other, I couldn't shake the image of Monica's car idling in my driveway. She wasn't a president anymore, but she was something worse. A ghost, a shadow clinging to a crown she'd already lost. And ghosts have a way of haunting long after the lights go out. Everyone said she'd finally gone quiet, but I knew silence was just her next weapon. The week after her recall, neighbors began to relax. Morning joggers waved, porch lights glowed warm instead of wary, and laughter returned to the cul-de-sac where whispers used to rule. But beneath it all, I felt the tension, like waiting for a storm cloud that never quite disappears over the ridge. And then late Tuesday afternoon, the storm broke. I was hauling the last of my boxes from the truck when 2 county vehicles rolled up. White, official, clipboards, badges, inspectors. They stepped out in perfect sync, their expressions professional, their posture stiff. "Mr. Brooks," one asked, "we've received multiple reports of unlicensed commercial activity on this property." My chest went tight. There it was, Monica's fingerprints. I showed them my deed, my receipts, my half-unpacked kitchen still cluttered with bubble wrap. They walked through the cabin, checked the outlets, even peered into closets. After 20 minutes, they exchanged a look, scribbled signatures on their forms, and handed me copies. "No violations found," the lead inspector said firmly. "Your property is in full compliance. Sorry for the inconvenience, sir." Relief washed over me, but it didn't last. Because across the street, standing stiff as stone, was Monica, watching, recording. And when the inspectors drove off, she raised her phone higher, shouting for everyone to hear. "This isn't over. He's dangerous. He's destroying our community." Her voice cracked, but the desperation only made it sharper. That night, an emergency notice appeared on every doorstep. Mandatory HOA meeting. Urgent threat to community stability. Neighbors grumbled. Some rolled their eyes, but they came, out of curiosity, out of habit, out of the simple human urge to witness drama implode. The clubhouse was packed tighter than ever. Monica stood at the front, her laser pointer shaking in her hand, her face pale but her eyes burning. Diane hovered behind her, wringing her hands. "Daniel Brooks," Monica began, her voice trembling but loud, "has manipulated this community, violated protocols, and endangered our safety. He has turned you against rightful leadership, against order. She clicked to the first photo on her poster board. My trash cans, stickers peeling in the wind. The room chuckled, not cruelly, just tiredly. The power those images once carried was gone. Next photo, my moving truck. A neighbor muttered, "Looks like every move I've ever done." Another slide, me carrying a box labeled kitchen. Someone actually laughed out loud. Monica's face twisted, her desperation leaking through the cracks of her composure. She slammed the laser pointer down and shouted, "Why won't you see it? He is the problem. He doesn't follow rules. He doesn't respect me." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Then Julia Evans rose from the second row, her voice steady, clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "This isn't about rules, Monica. It's about you. And we're done being afraid." Applause erupted, chairs scraped as people stood. The retired lawyer added his voice. "The recall vote was legitimate. You're no longer president. This meeting isn't sanctioned." Neighbors began tearing down her posters, pulling flyers from the walls. Someone unplugged her projector. The authority she'd clung to was being stripped away, not by me, not by Carter, but by the very people she'd ruled through fear. Monica's voice cracked into a scream. "You can't do this. I built this community. You'll regret turning on me." But even Diane, her loyal shadow, stepped back. Her eyes darted to the floor. She muttered something like, "I can't do this anymore," and walked out. For the first time, Monica stood alone. And then the final blow arrived. The clubhouse door swung open, and Officer Carter entered. His uniform carried the weight of law, his presence the calm of authority. He looked around the room, at the posters, at Monica trembling at the podium, and finally at me. "Mrs. Reeves," he said, voice calm but resolute, "this ends tonight." He handed her an envelope, an official citation. Misuse of emergency services, filing false reports, harassment. His tone never wavered. "You've been warned before, now the consequences escalate." The color drained from her face. Her hands shook as she clutched the envelope, her clipboard sliding to the floor with a hollow clatter. Neighbors whispered, some gasped, others nodded, satisfied. "This isn't justice," she muttered, voice small now brittle. "This is betrayal." But Carter didn't flinch. "Justice isn't about protecting titles, ma'am. It's about protecting people." And in that single sentence, the room shifted forever. Monica staggered back, eyes darting across the crowd, once her subjects, now her judges. She tried to speak, but her voice broke, and then she fled, out the door, into the night. Her footsteps echoed against the pavement until they were swallowed by silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The air was still, heavy, final. Then Julia turned to me. "Looks like the neighborhood finally got its peace." I nodded, but inside I felt something deeper. Not just peace, closure. Because Monica's reign had ended. Not with a gavel, not with a vote, but with truth crashing down on the lies she'd built her power upon. Everyone expected fireworks after her fall, but what we got was silence. Days passed, then weeks. Monica's porch light, once a beacon of intimidation, stayed dark. No more flyers taped to mailboxes. No more late-night cars idling in driveways. The shadow that had stretched over this street for years had lifted, leaving only the sound of wind through the pines. For the first time since I arrived, the neighborhood felt like home. Children rode bikes without parents glancing nervously at Monica's window. Porch conversations lingered long into the evening, laughter drifting through the cabins like music. Even the air seemed cleaner, freer, as if fear itself had been swept away. I sat on my porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching Mr. Patterson shuffle down the street. He waved, smiling, his back bent but his spirit straight. "Feels like the old days again," he said, voice rasping with warmth. "Neighbors helping neighbors, just like it should be." He was right. Julia stopped by later that week with a small basket of muffins. "A welcome gift," she said, smiling, "for the official new resident of Pine Ridge." The way she said it, warm, teasing, made me realize something I hadn't before. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I was part of the fabric of this place. And maybe that was Monica's greatest failure. She tried to isolate me, to brand me as a danger. but instead she'd push the community closer together. Still, I couldn't shake the memory of her last words in the clubhouse. This isn't justice. This is betrayal. The bitterness in her voice wasn't just anger, it was disbelief. She had built an empire of fear, and when it crumbled, she was left with nothing. Sometimes I wondered where she went. Rumors floated that she moved to her sister's place 2 towns over, that she was fighting fines in court, that she still drove through Pine Ridge at night, staring at the homes that no longer bowed to her. But the truth didn't matter. What mattered was what remained. One Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood gathered for a picnic on the green. Tables lined with food, kids running with balloons, laughter echoing where silence used to suffocate. I stood with Julia watching the scene when she said something I'll never forget. "You know, Daniel, fear doesn't disappear on its own. Someone has to stand up to it, and sometimes it only takes one person." Her words hit deep. I'd only wanted to move into my cabin, to unpack boxes, to build a life. But that simple act, standing firm when Monica tried to break me, had become something bigger. It had shown people they weren't powerless, that even the loudest voice of intimidation couldn't drown out truth forever. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, I walked past Monica's old house. Curtains drawn, porch empty, just another cabin now, no more throne, no more crown. And I thought of something Carter had said that night in the clubhouse when he handed her the citation. Justice isn't about protecting titles, it's about protecting people. He was right. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a folded petition passed hand to hand, in a neighbor speaking truth to power, in a community rediscovering its voice. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and looked around at the half-finished cabin. It wasn't perfect. Boxes still stacked, furniture still out of place, but it was mine. And for the first time, it felt safe. Because sometimes, home isn't just walls and a roof. It's the people who choose to stand with you when standing feels impossible. That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, staring at the quiet street. No shadows moving, no cars idling, just the steady glow of porch lamps, the rustle of wind, the sound of a neighborhood at peace. And I realized the lesson hidden in all of it. Power built on fear crumbles the moment fear is replaced with courage. And dignity doesn't always come from winning battles. Sometimes it comes from refusing to surrender. I took a deep breath, let the quiet fill me, and smiled. Because this wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was the proof that truth always outlasts tyranny. And the beginning of a story that was finally mine. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.